हेलो, सिंधी ॿोली वताक में तव्हांजो स्वागत आहे। हिन एपिसोड में असां वंदना गोविंदाणी सां ॻाल्हायो आहे। वंदना PhD करे रही आहे इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी इंदौर इंडिया में। पार्ट 2 में असां ॻाल्हायो आहे वंदना सां उनजे इंस्पिरेशन जे बारे में, उनखे किथां प्रेरणा मिली उन बाबति थोरो डिस्कशन आहे ऐं कीअं हुनखे रिसर्च कंदे इहो महसूसु थियो त 3 जनरेशन आहिनि, हिकु पार्टीशन खां पहिरीं ॼावल सिंधी जेके भारत में आया, पोइ ॼावा उते इंडिया में या ॿाहिरि, ऐं टियों जनरेशन आहे, थर्ड जनरेशन जेको संदसि जो आहे, कंटेम्पररी यंग सिंधीज़। त उन्हनि जे सम्झ में छा फ़र्क़ु आहे, लिटरेचर तरफ़ कीअं फ़र्क़ु आहे, उन जे बारे में डिस्कशन आहे। ऐं इहो बि डिस्कस कयासीं त पास्ट ॾांहुं ॾिसंदे फ्यूचर तरफ़ कीअं सम्झिजे, प्रेज़ेंट खे कीअं सम्झिजे, जेको सिंधीअ जो हेरिटेज आहे उनखे स्टडी कंदे बि प्रेज़ेंट ऐं फ्यूचर ॾांहुं ध्यानु कीअं रखी सघिजे थो, उन बाबति थोरो डिस्कशन आहे। Most people appear in to get junior research funding for doing PhD, for net is used for appointment for lecturers in colleges. Now, this is a big journey you have taken from a small town in India. So many congratulations to you, because I imagine how much work it involves, because I have been through that journey, but maybe 2 generations before you, but I have been through same journey and I know what it takes. So many compliments and very inspiring story. So then you discover your ignorance
Yeah.
about your language, about the richness of literature, and then you decide to do some work in that area, which is fascinating, and that is where we will now go in this part of conversation. But before we go into that, ऑलरेडी थोरो हिंट तो ॾिनी आहे भई घर जो माहौल कहिड़ो हो तुंहिंजो, पर तंहिं हूंदे बि वर देयर एनी रोल मॉडल्स, एनीथिंग दैट इंस्पायर्ड यू, कोई अहिड़ो वाक़ियो थियो हुजे, इवेंट थियो हुजे जो भई जंहिंमें तोखे महसूसु थियो भई मां बि कुझु कयां ज़िंदगीअ में, जंहिं तोखे मोटिवेट कयो हुजे, अहिड़ो कोई वाक़ियो आहे, इवेंट आहे, या कोई पर्सन या कोई बुक, कुझु टीचर? केतिरा दफ़ा माण्हुनि जी ज़िंदगीअ में टीचर जो वॾो अहमियत हूंदी आहे। Anything that comes to your mind?
I would say multiple things. Like when I start from my home, like Jima mentioned kayo miji papa ji bare mein, I have seen him working very hard. Like jin tarah sa ma unan ke mehnat kande, despite of his old age, ditho hai nande hunde ka. Like I have never seen him giving up. Like ketro bhi mehnat ji dande mein struggles hunan, challenges hunan, being a close family member, you can see this very closely. And kafi point te you feel how the person is managing through. But when you see the resilience, perseverance of a person, that guided me ki kuch behtar karno hai for the parents. So that sense I always got seeing my father working hard. Apart from this, उनका पोइ मां जॾहिं मां मेंशन कयो कि मां स्कूल में जॉब कई, प्राइवेट स्कूल में, त व्हेन आई वाज वर्किंग इन प्राइवेट स्कूल, त जेको माहौल मां ॾिठो प्राइवेट टीचर्स जो, जिन तरह सां चई सघूं था ओवर वर्किंग ऐं थोरो सो माहौल हूंदो आहे प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में, कैपिटलिज्म, अ लॉट ऑफ what we can say actually commercialization of education. Like जीअं कंहिंजा प्राइवेट स्कूल हूंदा आहिनि, पीपल आर जनरली ऑफ अ माइंड की जेकी असांजी डिग्री हूंदी आहे उनखे एतिरी महत्व न ॾेई सघंदा आहिनि। जनरली जेके पोज़ीशन आहे, अथॉरिटी आहे, दे हैव ऑल द राइट्स इन देयर हैंड्स। त हुते कुछ अहिड़ा छोटा मोटा किस्सा थींदा हुआ विच मेड मी फील की कुछ बेटर डिग्री हुजे, कुछ बेटर क्वालिफिकेशन हुजे, बिकॉज आई रियलाइज्ड इफ यू रियली वांट टू हैव योर ओन से, you need to have some power. Choki manu na budhnan. Like no matter how much capable you are as a teacher, but people count you as a school teacher. Not everyone necessarily, but he kafi common eye. That realization working in one of the school, I had very good experience also. I won't say it was a bad experience, but it was actually a lot of learning, seeing through your environment, seeing through different people, their perception of judging a school teacher. So there used to be some small events which made me realize कि कुछ खुद से worth के better करना है, maybe by being more qualified. ऐं तंहिंखां पोइ जीअं पाण अॻियां डिस्कस कंदासीं, I have met some of the prominent Sindhi scholars, Sindhi enthusiast, जंहिंजो मां सिंधी खे वठी करे जेको पैशन ॾिठो आहे, that really inspires me कि what does it mean to have a purpose in the life, how it is beyond money and career. I would mention further, or maybe I can mention now, like Dada Saheb Bijani. I think you must be knowing him.
Yeah.
So I have been in close touch with him, at close touch. So I've seen him, I've spoken to him for last 4 to 5 years. तो जेको मां उन्हनि जे अंदर पैशन ॾिठो आहे, हुजे कल्चर ला, लिटरेचर ला, this all things I would say कुछ लेवल ते काफी इंस्पायर कंदियूं आहिनि ऐं ईअं लॻंदो आहे कि what better we can do. So
Okay. That's very interesting because मां जेतिरो सम्झुमि तुंहिंजे चवण मां त apart from positive role model like साहिब बीजाणी जेको आहे आदिपुर कच्छ गुजरात में इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ सिंधोलॉजी जेको हिकु रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट आहे उनजो करंट डायरेक्टर आहे ऐं मां साहिब खे चवंदो आहियां घुमंदड़ फिरंदड़ एनसाइक्लोपीडिया ऑफ सिंधी त हू ज़िंदा एनसाइक्लोपीडिया आहे सिंधी ॿोलीअ जो सिंधी कल्चर जे बारे में उनखे जेतिरी जानकारी आहे उहो मां कंहिंखे कोन ॾिठी आहे जंहिंजे ज़ुबान ते हूंदो आहे त ख़ाली पुछण जी देरि हूंदी आहे त मूंखे साहिब लाइ ॾाढी इज़त आहे मां उनखे लॻभॻि 25 सालनि खां सुञाणा 35 सालनि खां सुञाणा सो मुंहिंजे लाइ उहा क़िस्मत जी ॻाल्हि सुठी क़िस्मत जी ॻाल्हि आहे प्लस जेके ॿिया सिंधोलॉजी जा बर्पा कंदड़ हुआ फाउंडर्स हुआ प्रोफेसर सतीश रोहड़ा प्रोफेसर वरियाणी प्रीतम वरियाणी ऐं दादा लक्ष्मी खिलाणी इन्हनि सभिनी सां मूंखे वास्तो रहियो आहे त I know how inspiring they can be, but you also had some interesting experience as a school teacher that forced you to think about your self-esteem and self-worth.
Right.
And you thought that can come more through getting even more qualified, getting even more educationally in a place where you are looked up to as someone who knows, which is थोड़ो साइड में चवां मां त it is opposite when you look at the respect for teachers ख़ासि करे स्कूल जे टीचर्स जी जीअं तूं ॻाल्हि कई compare that to European countries जिते मूंखे ख़बर आहे फिनलैंड जेको दुनिया में स्कूल सिस्टम जे हिसाब सां तमामु फेमस आहे टॉप ते ॻणियो वेंदो आहे फिनलैंड में टीचर जी रिस्पेक्ट तमामु घणी हूंदी आहे उते उनजी almost as much as professor उते चवंदा आहिनि भाई most eligible bachelor in Finland is a school teacher उन्हनि जी एॾी वैल्यू थींदी आहे उनजो कारण आहे त हू प्राइमरी स्कूल खे ऐं सेकेंडरी स्कूल खे ॾाढी अहमियत ॾींदा आहिनि ऐं हिकु क़िस्म जो उहो मिसिंग लिंक आहे असांजे केतिरनि ई एशियन कंट्रीज़ में ख़ासि करे भारत में ऐं साउथ एशिया में जिते प्राइमरी स्कूल एजुकेशन खे ऐं सेकेंडरी स्कूल एजुकेशन खे एतिरी अहमियत नथी ॾिनी वञे अपार्ट फ्रॉम एज अ पासपोर्ट टू गुड कॉलेज और यूनिवर्सिटी विच इज़ सैड एंड द थर्ड थिंग यू मेंशन सो दैट वाज अ काइंड ऑफ अ नेगेटिव kind of a push that I want to do and prove myself, right? And then and the third was about purpose in life. भाई कुछ पैसे खां वधीक थींदो आहे मान शान खां वधीक कुझु थींदो आहे ऐं उहो आहे स्कॉलरशिप नॉलेज ऐं उहो तो पंहिंजो पर्पस ठाहियो आहे जेको हिकु वॾी ॻाल्हि आहे ऐं मुंहिंजे तरफ़ां तोखे हिन लाइ कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स त ॿुधाए पंहिंजे PhD बारे में ॿुधाए
जी thank you so much for all the kind words and encouragement. मां मुंहिंजी PhD जे बारे में as I would start, first of all I would take the name of my supervisor, Professor Nirmala Menon, because she has been the one, I don't know, उन्हनि जो सिंधी खां वठी करे पहिरीं केतिरो एक्सपीरियंस हो. I don't think उन्हनि जो primary area of working was not Sindhi literature and culture, but still when I went up to her and I told her कि I want to do something in Sindhi literature and culture, ऐं जीअं पाण initially research start कंदा आहियूं, we generally don't have much idea about the exact thing we are going to do or we are going to put up with. But whatever limited knowledge I had back then, she took it very positively. She was all ready. She was all set to support me with my new crazy ideas. The I'm like very grateful to her कि उन्हनि मूंखे जिन तरह सां हू green light ॾिनी. She didn't stop me. Rather, she was so happy to hear about something new, exciting. And so she is one of the person I would say जंहिंजो काफी important role आहे as a great role in supporting my research in Sindhi literature and culture. Because as I was starting, I was quite confused. But because of her, things became easy because of her confidence in me. The like as I started, the biggest challenge which I encountered was accessing the Sindhi literature because as we know, most of the Sindhi literature जेको लिखजो आहे हू पर्शो अरेबिक में हाण इंडिया में देवनागरी में भी लिखन था ॿाहिरि यूरोपियन कंट्री में इवन रोमन सिंधी इज इन वॉग बट प्राइमरीली जेको सिंधी साहित्य चइजे हू पर्शो अरेबिक में आहे ऐं स्टिल सिंधी इन टर्म्स ऑफ मशीन जनरेटेड ट्रांसलेशन मॉडल्स या ट्रांसलिटरेशन चइजे या मैनुअल ट्रांसलेशन चइजे हिन में सिंधी में अञा ॾाढो डेवलपमेंट न थियो आहे a large corpus of Sindhi literature is still only available in Perso-Arabic script. So I started to begin with Sindhi short stories. So my idea was to study Sindhi short stories. That was the initial idea. Post-partition Sindhi short stories. I was not able to access the Sindhi short stories. छोकी मूंखे सिंधी में कुछ प्राइमरी एजुकेशन तो हुई कान कि मां समझी पाया कि किन तरह जो पैटर्न आहे. I am an English literature student. त कुछ सिंधी जी हेतिरी ॼाण कान हुई. तंहिंजे अलावा स्क्रिप्ट जो चैलेंज हो. And then very thankfully, I would say, search kande kande internet mein one day I got to see this name Indian Institute of Sindhology. And that was something that heightened my curiosity because it was again a new breakthrough to find out कि अच्छा सिंधी जो कोई इंस्टीट्यूट भी हुजे तो इंडिया में. When I had no idea कि सिंधी साहित्य छा थींदो आहे हुते अहिड़े इंस्टीट्यूट जे बारे में पतो पवण was another realization. Somehow I contacted दादा लक्ष्मी खिलानी जेका उन समय ताणी रिटायर थी चुका हुआ त उन्हनि मूंखे दादा बिजाणी जो नंबर ॾिनो and then luckily I contacted दादा बिजाणी त दादा बिजाणी खां जीअं मां ॻाल्हाइण शुरू कयो as a young student he was very happy छोकी दादा का जॾहिं बि केरु सिंधी जे बारे में ॻाल्हाईंदा आहिनि या पुछंदा आहिनि I think he feels very happy excited कि अच्छा there are people अहिड़ा माण्हू आहिनि जेका सिंधी में कमु करण था चाहिनि. And he open heartedly starts supporting. That was my experience as well. त जीअं जीअं मां उन्हनि खां डिस्कस कयो जेकी हिकु सिंधी टीचर जी कमी हुई because research ला you need to have some background understanding. You can't directly jump inside the ocean because असांखे ॾाढी हिकु नंढी शइ डीप में रिसर्च करणी हूंदी आहे बट बैकग्राउंड अंडरस्टैंडिंग एट द सेम टाइम इज वेरी क्रूशियल. त उहो बैकग्राउंड अंडरस्टैंडिंग मूंखे दादा जी मदद सां मिली. काफी पेशेंटली उन्हनि मूंखे काफी कुझु ॿुधायो एंड देन आई डिस्कस दिस इशू ऑफ पर्शो अरेबिक स्क्रिप्ट विथ हिम. Somehow when we were discussing over the phone call, very randomly, I don't remember if I suggested him or he very generously told me कि छा है इनमें अगर कहानी नथी पढ़ण अचंदी त मां पढ़ंदमि तुंहिंजे लाइ तूं ॿुधजे कहाणियूं. And then the thing started. He started reading the Sindhi short stories for me over the phone and I started recording them.
अच्छा.
And now like very happily I say कि मूं वटि 100 खां बि वधीक सिंधी साहित्य जी स्टोरीज़ वग़ैरह आहिनि जेकी दादा पढ़ियूं आहिनि फोन में ऐं मां रिकॉर्ड कयूं आहिनि.
अच्छा.
त लाइक वी फिक्स्ड अ टाइमिंग स्लॉट ऐं दादा हुनमें कहाणी पढ़ंदा हुआ मां रिकॉर्ड कंदी हुअमि ऐं कुझु नया वर्ड हूंदा हुआ जेका मूंखे न पतो हूंदा हुआ त मां उन्हनि खां पुछंदी हुअमि हू काफ़ी पेशेंटली मूंखे ॿुधाईंदा हुआ. ऐं हिन तरह सां मुंहिंजो सिंधी लिटरेचर का जेको चइजे फैमिलियरिटी वधंदी वई. मां स्टोरीज़ पोइ ओवर द टाइम इफ यू वुड सी कि काफ़ी कुझु हाणे डिजिटाइज थिए पियो बट आई वुड से 4 years before when I started it was less. हाणे कुझु 4 साल में या 8-10 साल में काफ़ी वधियो आहे, बट 4 साल पहिरीं मूंखे हेतिरो कंटेंट न मिलियो हो, छो कि मुंहिंजी शायदि अंडरस्टैंडिंग बि न हुई, अवेयरनेस बि न हुई। बट जीअं जीअं मां सिंधी शॉर्ट स्टोरीज़ ॿुधणु शुरू कयूं दादा जी आवाज़ में, काफ़ी कुझु उन्हनि जे थ्रू मुंहिंजो सिंधी लिटरेचर का फैमिलियरिटी थी। एंड ओवर द टाइम नॉट ओनली सिंधी शॉर्ट स्टोरीज़, दादा मूंखे सिंधी जी काफ़ी ॻाल्हियूं ॿुधाइण लॻिया, सिंधी कल्चर जी, जेको जीअं तव्हां सिंधी जा मेन सचल, सरमस्त, शाह अब्दुल लतीफ़, इन्हनि जे बारे में उन्हनि जा जेका राग आहिनि, उन्हनि जा जेका पोएट्री आहे, सूफ़ी, उन्हनि जी जेकी शायरियूं आहिनि, काफ़ी दादा ॿुधाईंदा हुआ फोन में। एंड आई वॉज अमेज्ड कि हेतिरो रिच लिटरेचर आहे, सिंधी सूफिज़म एतिरो डीप आहे, बट अगेन द सेम थिंग कि मूंखे ही रियलाइजेशन हो कि since now luckily I am in Sindhi research, I am getting to know everything, but still people of my generation, the family, friends, relatives, cousins, जेके भी मां सुञाणा, have zero understanding, have zero knowledge of all this literature and culture. So this was something that encouraged me कि ही जेको दादा एतिरी knowledge, जेतिरो तव्हां ॿुधायो कि encyclopedia, एतिरो treasure of Sindhi heritage culture उन्हनि वटि आहे, this should be preserved, this should be disseminated, this should be spread, circulated. And somehow over our discussions असांखे ईअं लॻियो कि something we can do to digitize this rare Sindhi knowledge literature in a way that it can be accessible to the younger generations like me who cannot read Sindhi literature in Pashto Arabic script.
Very good. हाणे इहो इन ते थोरो वधीक पोइ ॻाल्हाईंदासीं तुंहिंजो जेको प्लान आहे टू डिजिटाइज़। बिफोर वी गो देयर, तो जेको ही पोस्ट पार्टीशन लिटरेचर ते वर्क कयो एज अ रिसर्चर, you met lot of Sindhi scholars, writers, and so on. What were the main conclusions you could draw about what has happened about this marginalization of literature? Anything that you want to share about your findings in the paper? Because you have written a paper, जेको असां रखंदासीं podcast जे references में, and even your blog also, if you have a link, we will put that in. But can you briefly tell us a little about what you found in that interviews with many people you made, right? About 30-40 interviews you conducted, apart from very intense series of talks with Saib Bijani, who seems to be so kind and generous as always to give time to young scholars. But other findings from other people, what you heard, and what was your conclusion?
जी, so like मां जीअं तव्हांखे चयो कि मुंहिंजो पर्पस not particularly Sindhi literature की study करण हो, because I was never the student of Sindhi literature, but it is more anthropological, sociological, कि to trace the cultural marginalization. So जीअं मां इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ सिंधोलॉजी वयमि, तंहिंखां पोइ मूंखे काफ़ी ॿिए बि फर्स्ट जनरेशन सिंधी माइग्रेंट स्कॉलर्स, राइटर्स का ॻाल्हाइण जो मौक़ो मिलियो। दादा
And by
नामदेव
first generation, we mean जेके पाकिस्तान सिंध मां शिफ्ट थिया हेॾे, उन्हनि खे they were born in Sindh basically, right?
exactly, who were there in 1947.
Yeah.
हाँ, त जीअं काफ़ी सिंधी स्कॉलर्स आहिनि, आई वुड से हाणे काफ़ी घटि आहिनि, बट जेका आहिनि जीअं दादा नामदेव ताराचंदानी, दादा मोहन ज्ञानी, त इन्हनि जहिड़े कुझु विद्वान सिंधी स्कॉलर्स का मूंखे ॻाल्हाइण जो मौक़ो मिलियो। So some common thing which I discovered was the frustration regarding the underrepresentation of Sindhi literature in India. ऐं जेको सिंधी राइटिंग, रीडिंग ख़तम थींदी थी वञे, ऐं या फिर जेकी सिंधी राइटिंग थिए बि थी, साहित्य अकेडमी अवार्ड्स थी ॾे, NCPL, नेशनल काउंसिल फॉर प्रमोशन ऑफ सिंधी लैंग्वेज, कुछ जी स्कीम्स जे द्वारा काफ़ी प्रमोट थी करे सिंधी लिटरेचर राइटिंग के, बट एट द सेम टाइम जिन तरह जी राइटिंग लिखजे पई, होरो कंजम्पशन ना आहे। There are very less people who actually practically talk about Sindhi literature in general. Sindhi literature is very much limited to the Sindhi scholars, writers. Over the time I realized कि जेका माण्हू या त हाणे out of interest सिंधी पढ़नि था या सिंधी लिखनि था, या those people who are getting some attention because of their Sindhi identity and now they are interested, it is very much limited among those groups. But in general, जीअं हुजण खपे खुद जो नेटिव लिटरेचर ला अवेयरनेस हू ना हुई। तंहिंजे अलावा सिंस आई एम एट इंस्टीट्यूट लाइक IIT जिते देश जे अलग अलग राज्य मां माण्हू आहिनि। इन माय लैब देयर आर people from Bengal, there are people from Kerala. So the sort of awareness which I have seen in them towards their literature culture, I find is totally missing among people of my generation. So I, over the time ji my research kai, I realized the social challenges, the historical reasons behind that, like how partition has contributed towards it. India में जेको सिंधियन जो पंहिंजो राज्य काने ऐं जेको सिंधियन जी जनरल टेंडेंसी आहे अडॉप्शन असिमिलेशन जी, असांखे जेका एज अ रेफ्यूजी कम्युनिटी जेका फाइनेंशियल इकोनॉमिकल क्राइसिस हुआ, सोशल क्राइसिस हुआ, there are studies from scholars like Rita Kothari, Nandita Bhavnani, Saz Agarwal, detail में जंहिंमें ॿुधायो आहे कि the prejudices, the biases which were prevailed against Sindhis in the immediate post-partition period, that somehow contributed to the marginalization of their identity. That कुछ तरीके से हुनजो contribution हो कि Sindhi people somehow tended to use other dominant regional languages rather than resorting to their own language. But one thing that I realized that this seems to be changing very much with the current generation. And I discovered and I feel it has a very deep reason behind it. Because जेकी first generation we say हुई and जेकी उनका वो second generation हुई, they had to go through a lot because of the partition displacement, because of the physical deterritorialization, in terms of social resettlement, in terms of financial crisis. But when we come to the third generation of Sindhi migrants, I think now Sindhis are well settled socially, financially. So now we no more carry the trauma of past, no more carry the trauma of partition. And besides that, because of this digital media, because of this social awareness which is prevailing across digital social media platforms, there is a lot more understanding and awareness about our history of partition. Now I feel Asanji Jiki generation hai, it is actually embracing their history of partition. Asaka peri wari generation ke kafi kuch suffer karno payo, because I think my parents' generation or my grandparents' generations were discriminated because of their different identity, because of their different cultural habits. But now when it comes to my generation, I feel now we are so settled in the country. ऐं असांजो कहिड़ो हेतिरो हिस्टोरिकल पास्ट जो ट्रॉमा ना आहे जेको सेकेंड जनरेशन में हो. So now I think we are enough capable of fulfilling that gap, of taking forward the legacy, and this digital media plays a huge role. Like it is now adding as a weapon. Yeah, now I think we are असां सक्षम आहियूं कि असां किन तरीके सां वो जेकी गैप हुई उनके ब्रिज करे सघूं था.
Very good. हाणे हिन में there is, so we are sociologically speaking, सामाजिक विद्या जे हिसाब सां ॻाल्हाईंदे, what you are suggesting is that जेको first generation आयो after partition सिंधीज़ जो जेके उते ई ॼावल हुआ, वॾा थिया हुआ या नंढा हुआ, पर उन्हनि में obviously they face these economic challenges, settlement जा जेके थियनि था after completely being displaced, uprooted from one's place. And त उन जनरेशन खे त चॉइस बि कोन हुई त लिटरेचर ऐं उन सां कुझु आम माण्हूअ खे ईअं कोन्हे त स्कॉलर्स न उनखे ध्यानु ॾिनो. द फैक्ट इज़ दैट सिंधीज़ अची करे हिते कॉलेज बि खोलिया, सिंधी में पढ़ाइण जा स्कूल बि खोलिया, जंहिंजो फ़ाइदो मूं सेकेंड जनरेशन टाइप जा जेके माण्हू चइजनि जिन में मां पाण खे ॻणींदुसि त यू नो बॉर्न इन 60s 70s जेके हुआ, even late 50s में, they had chance wherever the Sindhi community set up schools, they went to those schools. But there was question of this identity and assimilation. The une में जेको while second generation had opportunity to engage with the cultural side, with the language side, it was never taken seriously. Like, I did go to Sindhi plays when I was child. I actually participated in Sindhi plays in school, but nobody emphasized the importance and the need for the continuity or deepening of the engagement with culture and literature. उन्हें जो शायद फ़क़त इहो कारण कोन्हे त असां डिस्प्लेस थिया हुआसीं. My view is that, and I will invite your opinion on that, that in the second generation, probably we underestimated the importance of deeper connection that we should have. ऐं उन जो शायदि कारण इहो ई हो त कोई माण्हू वॾो थिए थो पंहिंजे इकोनॉमिक, ऐं देयर वाज आल्सो इकोनॉमिक ट्रांज़िशन among the Sindhis, because from being marginal traders, they were coming into their own successful businesses, successful traders. So they obviously wanted their youngers to, at least boys. Girls, unfortunately, were still on the very margin of hierarchy or kind of social structures. पर बॉयज़ में आई नो मुंहिंजा क्लासमेट जेके हुआ स्कूल में तमामु घटि जेके हुआ कॉलेज में वञणु चाहींदा हुआ, छाकाणि त सभिनी जे घरनि में धंधा हुआ. सो फादर वांटेड सन टू जॉइन देम एंड सो ऑन. सो देयर आर मेनी forces pulling the youth of that generation, second generation, away from culture in a, I would say, unintended way. We really enjoyed Bhagats. So Asanje Ahmedabad mein there were tikanas where saji hafto Bhagat halani hui, programs halanda hua. So we were very fortunate. Only with the hindsight, I appreciate how valuable that experience was. But we have actually lost that touch now because there is no critical mass. One of the finding in your paper is critical mass na hai padhan waran jo. The consume तो वो क्रिटिकल मास वापस खे रिक्रिएट करे सघिजे थो. उन में मां सम्झां थो न फ़क़ति ही जेको योर जनरेशन कैन प्ले अ वाइटल पार्ट, बट आल्सो नाउ वी हैव टेक्नोलॉजी that can support the acquisition, the learning of language, and also use and promotion of these cultural experiences. Una disame, una direction me, one of the steps you want to take, which I want to hear about. But before we do that, what is your understanding of the second generation, which is people like myself who enjoyed Sindhi, loved Sindhi, but apart from the economic social factors, somehow a sense of complacency came that you start undervaluing your own heritage.
Right. It's very interesting observation. The जेको तव्हां second generation जे बारे में पुछो था, त I would say कि if I start with the first generation, so the first generation of Sindhi migrants always have had that sense of home linked with Sindh, because जिन तरीके सां उन्हनि जो सिंधी कल्चर का या सिंधी रिवाजन का जुड़ियलपनो आहे, वो काफी डिफरेंट आहे to the other generations which are born in India. The जिन तरह सां अटैचमेंट चाहिए फिजिकल होमलैंड का या जेको सिंध में रहण वारी ॻाल्हियूं थींदियूं हुयूं, कल्चर थींदियूं हुयूं, but somehow I think because of the social, political, economical challenges as a refugee community, who जिन तरीके सां ट्रांसफर थियण सघिया या थियण खपंदी हुयूं to the second generation, हू उन तरीके सां न थी पायूं. Because as you have already said कि खुद जा economical challenges हुआ, and then after that coming to the second generation, उन्हनि जो जेको sense of Sindhi identity हो, that was already, I would say, disrupted because of the absence of the homeland. So
Okay.
although I feel they were connected with the Sindhi traditions, like you said कि तव्हांखे कुछ काफी program attend करण जो मिलंदा हुआ, या I would say जॾहिं मां ॾाढी नंढी हुअमि, I still remember काफी फेमस हास्य कवि आहिनि, हू असांजे शहर में ईंदा हुआ, असां वेंदा हुआसीं. But I feel over the years, over the decades, it has been reducing, it has been decreasing drastically. मतलब जेको घटि थिए तो काफी घटिजी वियो आहे. त जेको सेकेंड जनरेशन ऑफ सिंधी जो कनेक्शन हो सिंधी कल्चर का या ट्रेडिशंस का, was not very much direct, but mostly dependent on the environment. There are Sindhis जेका सिंधी कॉलोनी में रहन था या सिंधी पॉपुलेटेड प्लेस में रहन था तो हुते कुछ सिंधी कल्चरल एक्टिविटीज वधिकन whereas there are people जेका हेरी जगहों ते रहन था जिते सिंधी स्कूल ना आहिनि सिंधी माण्हू घटि आहिनि then their understanding their connection with the culture is impacted. So I think choki already we had lost our homeland Sindh जेका connection हुआ in terms of culture in terms of celebrations that also gradually was getting impacted though we didn't realize but
बराबर
भी काफी लेवल ते घट थींदो पे वयो एंड एज यू ऑलरेडी सेड कि वो जेकी क्रिटिकल अवेयरनेस हुंदी हुई कि किन तरीके सां असां किन केना वने पो असांजो कल्चर आई थिंक वो उन समय ॾाढी न हुई बिकॉज again partition ka po resettlement people were busy in getting themselves educated india mein jeko linguistic reorganization ai states jo the everybody asa sindhi mostly wanted to get the education in the language that is good for their survival or education or economic benefits so I think now also because of the emergence of partition studies as a field as a discipline there is a lot more awareness we are able to gain about this loss of culture which was I feel mostly limited to the first generation of Sindhi migrants जे actual technical level te who separation महसूस कयो हो second generation I would say महसूस कयो but still that sort of realization was not very predominant because gradually who got थींदो वयो and still they never saw Sindh as a homeland they were never been in Sindh and then yeah third generation and then our story is quite different now we are more able to know about Sindh because of this social media there are videos coming up from Sindh सिंध जे बारे में काफी इंस्टाग्राम में फेसबुक में हाणे नया नया असां वीडियो ॾिसंदा आहियूं कि ही मंदिर आहे ही पुरानी बिल्डिंग आहे त the sort of I would say confrontation or the sort of connection जेको असांखे हाणे मिले पियो is very interesting is very stimulating for
yes
us
so that raises a question for me Vandana for you your generation not you not for you but it's more for you generation you represent. So this interesting development around technology, which has broken the physical boundaries, information can travel from anywhere in the world, and the जेका possibility आहे you mentioned it about finding information about सिंध में कहिड़ा मंदर आहिनि या ॿियो कुझु बि जेको बि आहे उते हिन वक़्तु उन बाबति हिन वक़्तु इंफॉर्मेशन कलेक्ट करणु ॾुखी कोन्हे का. So you had this exposure to that side of um, Sindhi life, which is not in India, but in Sindh, at least whatever is available online through Sindhis that they are producing from their information. Do you, I fear in this a risk for the third generation. I would like to know your response to that. That in this search for reconnecting, in this desire to reconnect with your Sindhi identity through the literature or the culture, you look beyond Indian borders. Like there are many people who live outside Pakistan and India. There are hundreds of thousands who live all over the world. Now, obviously, they can all zoom in on the region of Sindh through digital means. Is there a risk that you start looking backward with a sense of I lost everything, or do you see this as an opportunity to reconnect with the past, celebrate the present, but also look forward to what can be done with understanding and use of language? For example, I had differed with people who said Sindhi language extinction is nearby. I said, no, it is not, because there are 4 million people speaking in Sindhi in Sindh, Pakistan. There are maybe 500,000 outside. But that's not going to happen. A language spoken by 4.5 million people is not going to disappear. However, for the third generation, like yourself in India, असां ॾिसूं था घणनि ई घरनि में सिंधी नथी ॻाल्हाई वञे is there this risk that in the name of identity search, people just become too far backward looking and celebrating past rather than forget about worrying their future of spoken Sindhi? छाकाणि त ॿोली जो मतिलबु ई आहे जेका ॿोली वञे, ॻाल्हाई वञे. People talk a lot about script and its rituals and so on. असां ॾिसूं था हिते UK में बि, US में बि, rest of Europe में बि, Middle East में बि त्योहार ऐं ॾिण त्योहार त सेलिब्रेट थियनि था, पर घरनि में उहा सिंधी ॻाल्हाई नथी वञे. त मूंखे ॿ डप आहिनि. हिकु त सिंधी ॻाल्हाई नथी वञे, माना बोल बि न, त पोइ लिखण जो को उन ते बहस करण जो को मतिलबु कोन्हे स्क्रिप्ट ते. ऐं ॿियो इहो आहे त पुठियां ॾिसंदे ॾिसंदे असां वी बिकम टू बैकवर्ड लुकिंग एंड स्टार्ट सेलिब्रेटिंग पास्ट. नॉट एवरीथिंग इन पास्ट वाज गुड, वन शुड रिमेंबर दैट. But there is a tendency these days in societies in many parts of the world where people are stuck in past, and that digital medium is fueling that past because information is with everybody.
Very, I would say, insightful observation. ई जेको तव्हां चयो आहे कि हेतिरो हाणे जेको emphasis वधे थो सिंधी हिस्ट्री या असां जेको बि partition जे कारण we have lost the state, it can also take us backward. And as you already mentioned, कि not everything was good in the past. I would say language is one of the element, is one of the part of the culture. I would say this all is well connected, and it is all, I think this all comes from the awareness, about your history, from the awareness about your culture. So जीअं मां इनके ॾिसां थी, I really don't see it as a something जंहिंजे लाइ Sindhis want to do hustle or get back to their past or want to completely relocate themselves or want to revolutionize their history. I don't see it like this. Rather, I see it as some sort of new awareness which was long needed. So I feel अगर हाण असांजी जनरेशन के ही रियलाइज थिए थो कि हीअं सिंध में थींदो हो या सिंध जी ॻाल्हियूं हीअं हूंदी हुई या असांजे पेरेंट्स जी कुछ हिस्ट्री आहे. So I think somewhere this would help us to reimagine our Sindhi identity, because there has always been a sort of vacuum that we never realized existed, but it is there. Because when you stay in any of the state in India, you see people from dominant culture having very rigid cultural beliefs, having strict traditions, and they are adhering to it in a very rigid form. And you realize you don't have anything such like that. Like you are not compelled to speak your language, you are not compelled to worship a single god, or you are not compelled to, now though it is increasing, but जिन तरीक़े सां इंडिया में ॿे अलॻि अलॻि कम्युनिटी जा नियम हूंदा आहिनि धर्म जा, नॉट लाइक अलॻि अलॻि कास्ट में जीअं तरीक़ा हूंदा आहिनि, सिंधी में न आहिनि. So this is, I would say, both advantage as well as a vacuum. And this all used to happen because we don't know what our history holds. We don't know. We also had a system. We also have a lot of things actually. असांजो कल्चर भी काफी रिच आहे. असांजे कल्चर में भी काफी गीत, काफी लाडा, काफी त्योहारनि जा नियम, काफी पूजा करण जो हिकु अलॻि नियम, या कहिड़े त्योहार में छा ठाहिणो आहे, हिन सब जा काफी कुछ आहे. But we have not been in touch, or maybe we didn't realize the value of that. So I feel with this new understanding that is being developed, somewhere I think my generation, or I think this coming generation, would try कि कुछ हद ताणी हू follow थी सघनि. So I see it as a very positive point, because असां जिन तरह जी दुनिया में हींअर रहियूं था, like a lot of commercialization, a lot of capitalism, a lot of utility mindset, and Sindhi as a community जेको असांजो stance आहे, I am not very sure कि असांजो backward ॾिसण वारो mindset थी सघे थो, but rather this increasing awareness can help us to somehow reconnect with some of our cultural traditions. This may be the language or something. So I feel it's going to have a very positive output.
Okay, good. So that takes us nicely into the discussion about digitalization and its potential. And your work, you want to, I mean, one of the things you say in your paper that digital medium can be used to preserve, promote, and celebrate the literature and other aspects of culture. The Ona Babat, you are likely to embark on a big project with IIT Indore support and Syndology support. The उन project जे बारे में ॿुधाए जंहिंमें तो हिकु नेक्स्ट स्टेप खणी रही आहे इन डिजिटलाइज़ेशन ऐं हुनजो यूज़ सिंधी लिटरेचर जे प्रिज़र्वेशन जे लाइ ऐं प्रमोशन जे लाइ.